I think another concept I want to bring into our conversation is a community, because Web3 is completely community-driven, whatever community you're talking about, right? People, they are in specific like projects community, or they purchase certain NFTs because they feel they belong to that community, or they want to become part of that community. So I think that's also good, like for us to think about, when we are actually purchasing those NFTs with the physical goods, what kind of community are we trying to nurture out of this, right? What does this mean? Like, are we acting as a gateway between the real world and the Web3? Is it a combination? Like, what are you guys' take on that?
I think NFTs make community building a lot easier, because in the past, if you're a physical only product, maybe your only access to your consumer is their email address. Maybe if you're lucky, you can get their text numbers, and then what you can get is maybe certain emails, a few times a year, and then maybe you can get them to some certain in real person events. But now with this NFT, you can have a lot of virtual gated, like token gated events digitally in the metaverse. And the metaverse, I know it's not there yet, but I feel like it's giving us a lot of hope that we could extend our brand loyalty and consumer engagement into a completely different dimension.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And honestly, it's funny you mentioned that, because in the spirit space, like as opposed to a fashion brand where I can walk into Chanel and I can buy something from them and give them my email address, when it comes to the whiskey and the liquor industry and wine, it's almost impossible to buy directly from the producer, because in the US there's all these different tier systems and laws. So you actually have to go, they sell it to a distributor who sells it to a liquor store who sells it to a consumer. So the liquor store might have your contact info, and the distributor has the liquor store's contact info, and the brand has the distributor, but they don't actually know each other. There's parts of the chain are not communicating. So the end consumer doesn't really have a relationship with the producer in a way that the producer might want, to be able to invite them to an IR, to an in real life event, and to do, to really engage with them. So Web3 definitely changes that element of community, and it also allows for verified community. I've been in, as much as Discord can be really overwhelming because there's just so many. One of the cool things about a lot of these protocols, like Grape or some of these other ones, is that it checks your wallet and verifies that you have the correct NFT to get into a certain chat. So it doesn't even have to do with, let's say, like metaverse events. Even if it's just like, hey, I want people who own this brand of whiskey, or I want people who bought this specific sweatshirt, because we all want to talk about it together, but we want to talk about it together in private. So you can actually verify that the owner has that NFT, and they're not just someone who's pretending that they own it, or posting about the some picture they stole from somebody else's Instagram and posting it on their own and pretending they own it. Like, you can really verify that people own these things, which I think is actually really important, even just from like an Instagram perspective. I was thinking that, like, when you have marketing, right, all these people posting about how incredible their life is, and it's all like they're sitting on somebody else's car, and they're wearing rented jewelry, and it's like, hey, they're like really making people feel like, oh my god, I'm so behind because this person is so farther ahead of me, and really it's like all fake. When you're verifying ownership, if it's like, hey, I've got this really cool new blazer, and you bought it through your platform, and then all of a sudden everyone's like, okay, but do you really own it? And then they can go and check the NFT from the picture, or check on chain and say, like, you don't own that. You were borrowing it from your friend who was behind the camera. Like,
that's actually a very, very good point. Like, in the luxury goods world, where there's like the ultra high net worth individuals usually have personal shoppers. So those personal shoppers just go out and on paper they are these big spenders buying everything left and right, but they don't own them. And also from the brand's perspective, they're not really getting the data on who the end consumer is, and there's difficulty connecting with those consumers.
It happens.
Which is why brands spend so much money throwing these in-person events to get them in to see who actually owns them.
They're trying to find out who are our actual users. Exactly.
Is it fair to say, actually, like, okay, it's harder for the scammers or the brands to tell lies, to lie about certain stories, but it's also like harder for people to fake their ownership, because like this just raised a bar for everything, and then this kind of force average people to stick choose to who they are, who they belong to.
I would say that
this is such a philosophical question,
but at the same time, you're right. It'll hurt like brands that try and pretend that things that aren't limited, or they're like, oh, really limited release, and it's like they made like hundreds of thousands of them. So it'll stop them from doing that, because if you're trying to link every product to an NFT. we can see how many NFTs you minted. So it's like, okay, you claimed you only sold 5,000, but there's 100,000 NFTs. So which one is it? But at the same time, it'll also, like you said, it'll really prevent like, consumers from pretending they own things that they don't own. It's like, okay, well, they only made 500 of these, and I see 8,200 profile pictures or people advertising that they own it. So something's a little bit wrong over here, which I think is going to be an interesting way it'll shake out in an interesting way.
I think that's interesting, and we need to wait for the time to tell us how this is going to play along, because I think this is in the interest of a lot of different parties, and this going to affect like different parties' perspectives or lives. So I'm just curious about like how this is gonna go.